And some people think NVIDIA is doomed. I believe this is a completely incorrect notion. In fact, I foresee NVIDIA becoming even more sought after. Why do I think this way? Hello everyone, Error here. Are you having a good holiday? Before the DeepSeek incident, China released an open source software that was claimed to be far superior to OpenAI's ChatGPT. This sparked discussions about whether American tech giants like NVIDIA would be at risk, and if there would still be a demand for their GPUs, especially since such an impressive model was created using very inexpensive GPUs. There has been a lot of discussion about the significant advancements in China's AI technology, and now we have the DeepSeek R1 model that demonstrates incredible performance as an open source project. You can think of it as something similar to the ChatGPT 5103 model. The previous model, which was released last month, was the V3. Initially, it was just an ordinary model, but the arrival of the R1 model showcased exceptional performance with significantly fewer GPUs, employing a fundamentally different method compared to the techniques used by companies like Google, Meta, and OpenAI. This has caused a worldwide uproar and confusion. However, if we don't thoroughly review the research paper, there's a lot of unverified speculation going around that NVIDIA GPUs will become obsolete or that GPT will fail, leading to widespread panic and significant concern among investors. However, after thoroughly reviewing the paper myself, I can confidently say that these fears are greatly exaggerated and not supported by a careful examination of the facts. Initially, I intended to address this matter after the holidays, but given the urgency, I decided to make this video now while visiting my hometown, even though my parents are asleep. So, let's break it down. The recent paper discusses the DeepSeek R1 model. From an algorithmic perspective, reinforcement learning, which we call Gangwahag-sub in Korean, has been used to present a model for the first time. Its performance is said to be phenomenal. Knowing this, you can better judge whether NVIDIA will fail, whether Microsoft will collapse, or whether OpenAI will be unable to catch up. So, please listen carefully to what I have to say. Isn't it possible that my perspective might be flawed as well? I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. So this time they released something called DeepSeek R1, and then they introduced an improved model known as DeepSeek R1. Do you remember AlphaGo from back in the day, when it first made headlines? When AlphaGo first played against Lee Sedol, a version called AlphaGo 0 was later released. This 0 version, without any prior learning, used only reinforcement learning. It managed to catch up to OpenAI's most advanced model, ChatGPT. This is truly remarkable. Now, what is reinforcement learning and what is supervised learning? You might already be feeling overwhelmed, but I'll explain it simply. Let's briefly understand this part and move on. We need to judge if hardware or software, particularly the algorithm, is more crucial. First, let me briefly mention the DeepSeek R1 model, which is similar to AlphaGo 0. AlphaGo 0 is a model trained purely through reinforcement learning. Furthermore, the DeepSeek R1 features a unique core technology called Mixture of Experts, MOE, used by Zamina. This model has an astonishing number of neurons and parameters, totaling around 671 billion. That's a huge number, right? However, in practice, this model can use only up to 37 billion parameters. So there are several experts, and they use only what is really needed. This was used in the model by Jamin I, which is called the Mixture of Experts structure. The DeepSeek R1 used this method to solve specific problems. For example, if it's a math problem, it only activates the relevant parts for that math problem. However, both OpenAI and Meta originally enhanced the inference capabilities of traditional LLMs through supervised learning using pre-trained data. Take, for instance, a model that constantly reads a variety of texts, from books to websites, including the New York Times. This continuous reading trains the transformer model to predict the next word in a sequence based on probability. This method has been the conventional approach, whether through a mixture of experts or other techniques. However, this new DeepSeek, the R1 model improves its inferencing capability purely through reinforcement learning, without any initial data. It particularly excels in mathematics and coding, outperforming models that rely on supervised learning. This is the crucial point. So, what exactly is reinforcement learning? Previously, we had sequences like can you, please, and come, followed by here. It calculates the likelihood of the next word appearing. During the pre-training phase, it processes various documents, texts, and codes to predict the following word based on the given input. This implies there is a correct answer. However, with extensive text training, predicting the next word becomes much easier, confirming the presence of a correct answer. In this concept, you can see it as learning from maps. For example, DeepSeek R1 is purely reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning starts without a correct answer initially, just like it did with AlphaGo 0. In the early days, Lee Sedol would play Go by referencing the keyboard and considering the correct move. This was how the initial version of AlphaGo operated. However, AlphaGo 0 was different. It had no predefined answers and the model experimented on its own. When it found something that worked well, it received a reward. For instance, the capital of South Korea is Seoul. If you say it like this, the reward will be high. The capital of South Korea is Seoul. In this case, the reward would be high. In this way, the model evaluates whether the attempted response is correct or not. Then, by giving some sort of reward based on this evaluation, the model interacts with the environment and grows autonomously. The transformer model, basically. First, it learned from many correct answers in text form. Then, it progressed by predicting the next word. In the case of DeepSeek R1.0 this time, it was guided to receive rewards without needing such correct answers, and it works. This part is really amazing. In fact, have you heard of RLHF when we talked about ChatGPT 3.5 and InstructGPT? The RL in RLHF, which we are discussing here, stands for reinforcement learning. However, the HF part refers to human feedback. Traditional models do use reinforcement learning, but they do not evolve through self-driven interactions with their environment. Instead, they rely on direct human feedback to apply reinforcement learning. This approach notably boosts ChatGPT's performance, as it involves humans providing feedback after supervised learning to differentiate between good and bad responses. Think of it like attending extra classes after school to improve performance. Previously, this approach relied heavily on human feedback. However, with DeepSeek R1.0, the AI autonomously provides rewards and learns by itself, which is quite impressive. This is the wow factor here. I have a lot more technical details prepared, but I will save those for a separate discussion. I know you're curious about whether this will truly revolutionize the world, so let's dive in quickly. What's fascinating about DeepSeek R1.0 is its use of the chain of thought method during hypothesis testing, which has been receiving increasingly positive feedback. I'll delve into this more thoroughly later, but focusing only on this aspect can lead to repetitive answers. You know the similar patterns that have emerged, right? There were issues like generating long responses or mixing Chinese and English. To address these, the model DeepSeek R1 was developed. The DeepSeek R1 leverages a method where AI evaluates its own performance, allowing it to learn independently without human input. This approach, known as a hold start, involves an initial phase of training. Rather than using pure reinforcement learning from the beginning, it starts with fine-tuning to establish a direction, and then applies multi-stage reinforcement learning. DeepSeek R1.0 initially faced difficulties navigating on its own, so they employed hold start data to guide it in the right direction. This allowed the AI to start rewarding itself and improve its learning autonomously. I'll delve into more specifics in a separate video. What's interesting here is that the AI has what they call an aha moment. While traditional models learn a predefined chain of thought pattern, the DeepSeek R1 continuously engages in reinforcement learning on its own, naturally undergoing a deeper thought process. At first, it finds answers in a simple way, but gradually it learns to find more accurate methods on its own. This is a feature that is rarely seen in traditional LLMs. So, it shows performance that can surpass OpenAI's O1 model. It can expand its problem-solving abilities. The more surprising part is that there's more. We call this distillation. It turns the model even smaller. The large model compresses and transfers the smaller model's inference abilities. But even this small model maintains performance at the level of GPT-40 Mini. So the feeling is something like this. China has a lot of NVIDIA GPUs, but they might end up with many outdated ones. They have imported a huge amount, but even that has its limits. Despite creating good models and downsizing them through distillation, they still perform well. So the conclusion is, do we even need NVIDIA GPUs? But I think that's a completely wrong idea. Let me explain why I think so. Anyway, in my opinion, it is true that pure reinforcement learning has achieved powerful performance, and AI has these aha moments where it can continue its own thought process. This is a feature of reinforcement learning. It finds solutions on its own. For example, it can discover new ways to defeat KGA that do not follow traditional Go strategies. In the past, it was hard to generate and infer thinking patterns directly, like chain of thought methods. Now, this has been enhanced. Distillation still works well, allowing small models to keep high performance. The fact that these advancements are open source is quite shocking. When we look at these performance metrics, they all appear to be similar or even better. We'll delve into the specifics later. For now, comparing GPT-455 and Claude 3.5 with DeepSeek, which has been distilled from models like Llama and Cuban, clearly shows its impressive performance. So, we need to consider whether this technology is truly irreplaceable. When we think about it, the answer is no. This has already been shared as an open source paper. If we discover that this method works well, it is indeed surprising. It highlights the hard work of AI researchers in China and Korea. However, this technology is not irreplaceable. Therefore, the notion that other companies can't catch up is a misconception. Personally, I believe that leveraging reinforcement learning to significantly scale up existing methods such as RLHF or supervised learning sends a powerful message to numerous AI researchers, encouraging them to explore different approaches. From a technical standpoint, this is indeed correct. However, the notion that NVIDIA will collapse is something I find to be a fundamentally flawed perspective. I think this is a completely wrong idea. If NVIDIA was popular, it will remain so. Why do I think this way? Well, consider this. If you view models like DeepSeek O1 or O3 as the ultimate AI models, then this idea might hold water. But let's think about it. All the major tech companies globally are striving to develop the most advanced AI models like O1. If you consider it a limitation, you might think, why bother with that? Just use DeepSeek since it's open source, and you can build with it using even a less powerful GPU. But let's flip the perspective. If such impressive performance was achieved with a subpar GPU, using a high-performance GPU or an advanced AI chip, isn't it possible to achieve even greater results with these streamlined algorithms? I honestly do not understand why people are not considering this possibility, to be frank. I think there is a lot of misinformation spreading around. Personally, I believe that even with lower performance hardware, reinforcement learning can be effectively utilized to optimize algorithms. This can sometimes yield better results than the traditional method of scaling through pre-training. This is a great example, truly excellent in my opinion. But it is not about belittling it. If we advance further, we can develop better hardware and next models or AGI. In such a scenario, using this technology will yield better models. We need to think about the next model, not just the current one. Therefore, hardware companies will benefit even more from big tech. Honestly, I think it could lead to a bigger boom. Everyone is trying to use this technology to learn faster. Once again, I apologize if the video quality is a bit uneven. I'm recording this under less than ideal conditions with my cat, but logically, isn't it reasonable to think this way? Therefore, it's not just NVIDIA's GPS, but a wide range of hardware that could see increased demand. When software is optimized to this extent, it leads to superior performance, sparking a need to experiment with even larger models, wouldn't you agree? Currently, OpenAI, Meta, and Google are competing on their platforms. To stay ahead as a company, you need to quickly make early investments and strategically counter China as a nation. That's the key point here. China has been consistently developing well for a long time, be it in autonomous driving or other areas. This is not an unknown fact. And look at how much investment is happening in China right now. China could develop things that others, or even American companies cannot. Of course, that is possible. But folks, this does not mean the game is over. It is still ongoing. You should not just look at this snapshot and think, oh, China has won. America is done. That is not the case, in my opinion. So moving forward, NVIDIA is poised to attract even greater attention. And as the race to swiftly build platforms for algorithm experimentation heats up, the value of AI engineers and AI algorithm designers will significantly increase. Additionally, the trend of developing smaller models in generative modeling is evident, with OpenAI's O1min model serving as a prime example. But initially, regarding learning, reinforcement learning, and other aspects, it wasn't easy because China had to work with limited resources. Considering the constraints, China had no choice but to intensify their focus on algorithm research due to the US sanctions and limited access to key metrics. With hardware capabilities being restricted, they had to compensate by advancing their software development, which led to these outcomes. To be clear, I am not siding with either China or the US. I am simply laying out the current situation. Moreover, given the restrictions on AI in China, their strategy naturally leans towards supporting open source and open ecosystems, despite their efforts to remain closed. If the US and its allies refuse to use their technologies, they have no choice but to adopt this approach. This way, they can incorporate more data into their models. For instance, even ChatGPT is now. Models like O3 are considered as the preliminary stages for creating advanced generative data for the next AGI, and there are discussions about how China needs to generate a large amount of open source data to leverage it effectively. In some ways, China might find an open source approach to be advantageous, and I believe this is a perspective worth considering. People are getting excited and saying things like, look, we need to choose open like Meta. This reminds me of the past competition between Google's Android strategy and Apple's more closed approach. It's clear that China could follow a very effective strategy with this. That's why Meta is under even more pressure now, as we hear on Blind. People are taken aback that we're pouring in money while they manage to do it for less. However, differences in labor costs, political climates, and other factors can explain these variations. I'm not saying we shouldn't be vigilant. Instead, I want to address the tendency to exaggerate and misinterpret the situation. Numerous companies like Microsoft are rolling out AI services. Companies like Google are indeed facing risks as they quickly adopt more affordable models. Nonetheless, from a hardware perspective, I believe the demand for hardware could potentially increase. In the future, it will be important to observe how this open source ecosystem, which allows anyone to take and build upon, evolves. Despite the efforts of major tech firms, if everything becomes open, if such an advanced model becomes freely available, who would still use PT? This could lead to a fundamental upheaval. Developers have embraced open source, which is why we see comments like, Google has lost its advantage. In this way, China can effectively counter these wealthy tech giants. Similarly, Meta is treading a comparable path. These aspects deserve careful attention. Reinforcement learning alone showed significant results. Using cold start data early on, it matched or even surpassed top models. However, there were areas where it did not perform well. This can vary based on the minimum level of the mixture of experts model. There are many points to consider in this regard, but thinking that the US is completely doomed seems too exaggerated to me. I wanted to share my personal opinion, not to claim that my view is absolutely correct. However, I also want to hear your thoughts in detail, so I have summarized this video. This has been Error.